I am the lawyer for this presentation, so you're lucky you only have one of us. My name is Dan Timins. I'm a trusted estates and elder law attorney, as well as being a certified financial planner. I am giving you this webinar from the beautiful heart of Midtown Manhattan. So I do not claim responsibility for any of the sirens or any of the loud cranes or anything else that you may hear in the background. But I do apologize if that does happen. I've kind of just gotten used to it myself. So what are we here to talk about today? We're talking about making smart legal decisions with long-term care policies and Medicaid. And if we have extra time, we can do additional documents. The presentation tends to be based off of an hour and a half. I know we only have an hour, so I'm going to try to cover the parts that I think people really want to focus on. So the big question that we always ask is, what do people want to focus on? Well, first of all, you probably don't want to focus on the disclaimer, but once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. So what are we talking about today? We're asking, what are the steps to take to pay for personal care needs? Regarding financial matters, we're asking, what are insurance policies that deal with these types of care needs? They're also called long-term care policies, or life insurance with a long-term care component. Financial matters regarding resources available to everybody for those who do not qualify for their own insurance. You know, you may not be able to qualify if you're sick. There is another option out there. It's called Medicaid, and it is government paid as opposed to self-paid. And then how do we properly transfer assets to qualify for Medicaid, since Medicaid is not permitted for people who are not quote unquote impoverished. And by the way, if you are impoverished, you don't need an attorney to get onto Medicaid. You just show up at the Department of Social Services and they'll put you on Medicaid. But if you're not, you tend to need someone like, in my position, who's an elder law attorney who knows how to do this. And lastly, if we have time, we'll get to suggestions to protect family wealth in addition to Medicaid. That's only part of what Medicaid is all about. So what are we really talking about today as far as what are the needs that come up? Well, they tend to be things such as helping people transfer, which is walking. And it doesn't mean walking around the park. It means more or less walking from your bed to your shower, to your kitchen, to your bathroom. Bathing, helping somebody with their bathing needs. Dressing, helping people dress. Eating, of course, continence, and toileting. These are all the types of things that would help us to qualify for things like long-term care or for Medicaid. Now, again, benefits that are paid by long-term care and Medicaid are based on the symptoms of the illness, not the illness itself. The fact that I have stage 4 cancer and may only have 6 weeks left to live does not mean that I qualify for Medicaid. The fact that I am unable to transfer or bathe myself or to toilet myself, I may have an illness that would last another 30 years, like multiple sclerosis, or 50 years. It's the symptoms that matter. It's not the illness. Now, the first thing that comes up are, what are always these challenges that people have to face? You know, you as caregivers, or you as children, or you as spouses, or you as adults who are taking care of a younger family member, maybe they're a child, maybe they're a niece or nephew, someone else, has a bunch of challenges that get put in their way. And these are just some of them. So first of all, we'll go over some of these, and some of them we're just going to accept that they are what they are. But first of all, this is hard work, and I will show you how this is hard work. If you are going through this already with a family member, you know what it is. Giving this care is humiliating to my family member. Or if you're the person who's receiving care, sometimes it's humiliating to you. You ask yourself, can I just pay someone cash to do this? Which is, yes, you can, but what do you mean personal care may not include cleaning and cooking? I thought I was paying for everything under the sun. Well, if you're paying out of pocket, you can pay for anything. But if you're getting Medicaid or long-term care, you may not get all the services that you think you are entitled to. And then the big one is, but I don't want mom to go to a nursing home. And the good news is they don't want you there either. So first things first, let's go over this is hard work. And these are just, 4 of the most common examples that I see. Spouse to spouse, I'll tend to have a husband and wife, and maybe the husband is 92 years old and wife is 86, and husband has had the problems in this point. And husband is still bigger than wife, even though he's gotten, substantially older than when they first got married, most likely, he's going to be bigger than her usually. And so now you have the well spouse who also happens to be the physically smaller spouse trying to help the substantially larger spouse who has issues. So it risks the who would otherwise be a perfectly healthy spouse physically. And that's no good, because then you have 2 people who are in trouble. Parent to child is difficult because there is the time commitment factor. When you have kids, you have them for the rest of your life, God willing. Unfortunately, when they're disabled, this has a lot of issues because there's a big time commitment for disabled children. It hurts people's careers. It limits the free times they have, and it also cuts down chances for personal development and relationships. Child to parent. So let's say you are a child and you're taking care of a parent. Well, you're in one of two situations. Either your parent expects you to care for them, or they had no expectation. They really don't like it. So the problem is that the parent or the child may be too demanding, or they may not be demanding enough in this circumstance. You know, same thing like everything else. The parent-child relationship is more complex than we give it credit for. You know, the problem is it tends to be humiliating. It's not unusual also sometimes for in-laws to have to take care of you, which is not great either. I had a woman who took care of her mother-in-law, and while the mother-in-law was healthy, they did not get along. It was not a good setup at all. And then sibling to sibling, you know, the problem is you don't always have a close relationship between your children. One child, if one is disabled and the other one is okay, you know, the one who's okay is out and having their own times, has their own life, maybe they get married, maybe they have kids. You know, your other child has a lot of problems. The problem is this is a very long-term type of relationship. And then it tends to burn out over time. You know, sometimes your well-child spouse may say, hey, you're spending too much time taking care of your disabled brother or sister. And eventually, if you have one child who's okay and healthy and then passes away, it may fall to your grandchildren, this disabled person's nieces or nephews, to take care of them. So this is hard work. Can I get paid for caring for somebody? And the answer is, it's not always easy. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Long-term care insurance policies, the answer tends to be yes. Maybe if you have a managed long-term care program, which is through the Medicaid program, and we'll go over that. But if it is traditional Medicaid, the type that most people are familiar with and most people use, the answer is no. Medicaid will not pay your family member. They have to be qualified in order to do it. The big last thing I bring up in this exact category is the type of affordable care we used to have. You know, most of this program is based off of New York and New York laws and New York requirements and guidelines. You used to be able to pay some unfortunate person minimum wage for 13 hours and they would be stuck working 24 hours or at least being in the residence 24 hours a day to take care of that individual. It's not that they didn't get to go, but like they would be expected to be there for 24-hour stretches at least. Now, the good news for the consumer, the person who is paying for this care, is that they only had to pay 13 hours to some unfortunate person at minimum wage. And then that person would be there for 24 hours if they got some meal times and given time to sleep. Well, New York decided, you know what? If someone's working 24 hours, they should get paid for 24 hours. So that is now gone. And that's something in the past year. So again, if you have people who need 24-hour care, you can't expect to pay someone less than the amount of hours they're actually working or present on the scene. And that's been very devastating to some people. Next is the person who always says, I don't want to go to a nursing home. Please don't send me to the nursing home. I got you. Believe me, I wouldn't want to go to a nursing home. I don't want your family member to go to a nursing home. Only my high school bully deserves to be in a nursing home. However, if he does go there, the issue is going to be this. The family member probably needs to be, or my high school bully needs to be at the nursing home if he or she is there because they need a nurse in the next 24 hours or nursing services. We don't just send people to the nursing home. People actually need to be there. And the reason why is that if you're on Medicaid, the nursing home really doesn't want you there. And here's why. You know, when you look at Medicaid, it's kind of like being a store owner. Who would you want to work with more? The person who's going to pay you $18,000 this month or the person who's going to pay you $12,000 this month? The answer is going to be $18,000, right? Well, Medicaid says we are only going to pay you, Mr. or Mrs. Nursing Home Owner, $12,000 a month, approximately, in the New York City area to take care of people. Now, if I'm the nursing home and you say you're paying out of pocket, I say, you know, bang, zoom, terrific, because I'm getting paid 18 grand. So I would love you to stay here. But when you're getting, you know, your benefits from Medicaid, the nursing home says, this is okay. This is not ideal for us, but we'll take it because it pays for the bed and gives us, you know, more or less a little bit more than Starbucks money. And you say $12,000, that seems like a lot of money. Don't forget the amount of care that these places are giving. They have nurses on staff. They have medical equipment of type on staff, or at least present. I guess medical equipment isn't on staff, but you get the idea. So if you're healthy, nursing home only wants to accept you if you're paying out of pocket. If you're on Medicaid, they don't want you. And long-term care is somewhere in between the two. They tend to be okay with it. And then you have a family member who's in a nursing home who says, okay, all better now. I have this happening. My wife still has her grandmother alive. She's, I mean, like as old as Methuselah. She could have dated him for all I know. And she says, all right, I'm ready to leave the nursing home now. Take me out. The issue is that the nursing home, the facility, will want to see that this person who's going to be leaving has the appropriate amount of care individuals, care employees in place before they are released. You know, if this person who's in the nursing home has the mental capacity to say, I want to leave, they have to say, okay, you are going to release yourself against our suggestions. So that person would need to sign paperwork. If someone's incapacitated, by the way, they can't do that. But the big thing is that nursing home will want to see what your release plan is. And when you're trying to get released from a hospital, you'll see the exact same thing. They're going to want to see what's going on. What is your care going to be once you leave here? Now, the good news is this. When you want to flip the tables here, your grandma wants out. Well, let's say grandma is being a very difficult person. She still needs to be at a nursing home. The nursing home says, you know what, we didn't sign up for this. We want to kick you out. You're out on the street. Boom. And the truth is, they can't do that. You know, a nursing home is kind of like it's a prison. Once you're in, the only way you can get out is to go. So, you know, nursing homes cannot kick you out once you're admitted unless you're incredibly violent to other people. The big thing that people say is, oh, I have an idea. I'll just pay that nice neighbor next door cash to take care of my family member. Won't that help out? The answer is yes, but here's the but. You're risking being an employer. And when you make infractions into employment law, you're doing a few things. You're not paying for that person's half of their Social Security and Medicare. You're not paying disability. You're not paying unemployment. And last but not least, you are evading taxes because of that, because you're not paying those taxes. Plus, you know, you're taking a good deal of responsibility here, because it will skip to the third one. If someone hurts themselves, they can sue you, since you're the one who tends to be paying that person cash. Mom and dad isn't always paying the cash. Now, the middle one that we're bringing up here, you're probably paying this person cash. And the issue then is that the healthcare expenses can't be deducted. So if mom or dad is paying for the care and they're being cared for by someone who's accepting cash, you can't deduct that because you're trying to hide it, right? You're not paying somebody over the table. You're paying them under the table. So not only are you having this issue where there's tax evasion involved because you're not withholding for Social Security and Medicare, but also you can't deduct the expenses now. And these are probably going to be substantial expenses. So paying someone cash out of pocket works to a point, but it's perhaps not the most preferred way of doing this. So what are the solutions? Today we're talking about two of the solutions. One of them is long-term care, which is insurance, and the second is Medicaid. We'll start with long-term care. Long-term care is privately funded insurance. It's a program that you qualify for, and if you don't qualify for it, you don't get it. So if you're ill, for example, you know, like I said, I bring up the stage 4 cancer, you probably can't get life insurance in that case. Well, if you have Alzheimer's or dementia already, long-term care is going to say, you're not a good bet for us. We are not required to sell you a policy. And so they're not going to do it. Long-term care is privately funded and you have to qualify. Now, it is not a government program, like I am saying. That's Medicaid. Long-term care is private insurance. The only thing is, because it is insurance, there is some state regulation involved. So, for example, when long-term care policies want to raise the premium because people live forever now till they're 124, they need to ask the state in order to raise those premiums. Now, what does long-term care look like now? You know, long-term care policies used to be their own policies. You just purchased long-term care and that was it. And believe it or not, that was not so bad. Those benefits look good now. A lot of these older policies I see from the mid-90s, they look pretty good because the only thing you're paying for is the long-term care insurance. And the issue is this: these life insurance companies that issued long-term care policies, they messed up. All right, they underpriced these things radically. My grandmother Viola died at 67. In the meantime, my wife's grandmother's 98, going on 99. These long-term care policies had no clue that people were going to increase living or life expectancies so much. They didn't know that they were going to get horrible interest rates, because look at what interest rates are for you and me right now. and they had no idea the sheer amount of money that was going to be paid regarding day-to-day care. The expenses have gone up. So they got rid of these policies, they meaning the insurance industry. There are still a handful out there, but they are very expensive, and you better be like an athlete to qualify for them. You have the littlest problem, we're not going to take the risk on you, is what the insurance company says. Now what insurance companies do, and they can still deny you, but what they will do to try to save their own bacon because it really got burned, is that they have these hybrid policies. And it is permanent life insurance policies that have a long-term care component built into them. The example I give at the bottom is if I get a permanent life insurance policy for $1 million, the life insurance policy may say, we will limit your long-term care expenses if you need it to $300,000. So it's usually a percentage, and that's also going to increase the cost of the policy. Now, the good news of that is this: no matter what, I win. If I die, I win. If I need to go to a nursing home, I win. I guess you could say either way, you lose. The downside is that these policies do cost money too, because you're paying for two different aspects, not just life insurance, but also long-term care. But from an insurance standpoint, if you can qualify, this is really what is out there at this point. The old standalone policies, you don't really see those so much anymore. And then you keep saying, well, Dan, you know, what's going on with these prices? You keep talking about, how do I figure out what these prices are? Here are the factors that will determine how expensive that insurance premium is going to be. First of all, does this long-term care policy cover home care and institutional? When we say institutional, by the way, that's the nursing home. Leave it up to lawyers to think of a worse term than nursing home. We call it institutional care. Does the policy cover both of these things? And does it cover them in the same percentage? Or can I get only $150 a day for home, but $300 a day for institutional care? The next is going to be the daily benefit. If I only want $150 a day, it's probably going to cost less in the policy than if I want $300 of benefits per day. There's the actual benefit period, not just how much do I want per day, but how many days do I want to have this policy available to me. The waiting period, just because I'm sick for 3 days doesn't mean this long-term care policy is going to kick in. The longer the waiting period I put in there, the more I'm going to pay out of pocket up front on my personal care out of my own expenses. The less the policy is going to cost, because I'm not telling them, hey, if the littlest thing happens, you guys have to start covering me immediately. And last but not least, you can get a waiver of premium. For example, if you become disabled, or if the long-term care policy kicks in, you can stop paying. All these things will affect how much the monthly premium is going to be, or quarterly premium, or annual premium on the long-term care policy. The better it looks for you, the more you're going to pay the insurance company. That's more or less like a be-all, end-all rule. So how does the benefit work? So now we've said, okay, I want to figure out all these bells and whistles, how much I have paid for, etc. Now, what am I getting out of it? Well, let's say you say, I want to get $250 of coverage per day for every day for the next 5 years. And you figure you're in trouble if you're going to use like, you know, $300 a day because they're only going to pay $250 a day. And you would be incorrect in that case. Long-term care benefits are based on pools. So for a person who has $250 of benefit per day for 5 years, they actually have a pool of $456,250 available to them for their care for the rest of their lives. Now, the good news is, if someone needs more like 400, not 250, they can take money out faster. The bad news is if you run out of time because you used all the benefits up front and you've reached year 3 and you've used the full $456,000 in this hypothetical, you're on your own. They give you flexibility, which is great. So the pool benefit is great if you need less benefits initially. What I've tended to find is that people tend to need more benefits than they want, or at best, they kind of get what they need, which is if you get a $250 policy, typically the best case scenario is you're going to need $250 once it kicks in. But there are some circumstances where it doesn't happen. So if you use the funds slower, long-term care will last longer. If you've only spent $300,000 worth and you're at the end of year 5, you still got another $156,000 in this hypothetical. Now, how they are paid. Most long-term care policies, like I said, are pooled. Use as much of the pool as you would desire, when you would desire. Now, the difference between long-term care and Medicaid is this. Medicaid chooses how much care you'll get. you'll see in a few moments that it may only qualify you for 4 hours a day of home care instead of 24. But if you're on long-term care, you could say, I want someone there 24 hours. And if you are properly or appropriately disabled, they'll allow you to do that. The big issue with Medicaid now is that I can't get very easily 24-hour home care for people. I can't have a home health aide there and pay by Medicaid for 24 hours out of the day. Long-term care, not difficult as long as you qualify. So we've said it enough. We've discussed it briefly in passing. We've kind of alluded to it. Now let's get to the main course. This is Medicaid. I can tell you that since I opened my law practice, dealing with Medicaid benefits has been like a bottomless well. It has been a consistently revolving door of people coming in and out, trying to qualify for Medicaid at the back end, meaning when they get sick, or at the front end, when they're planning to create different types of trusts. Medicaid has been the hot ticket in the legal world. I mean, more than immigration law. If you're talking about what lawyers have been busy doing, Medicaid has been a growth field because people keep getting older and they get more intelligent, so they realize what programs are out there. Medicaid is a healthcare and personal care program that assists low income and asset families or individuals that pay effectively for long-term medical and custodial care costs. It happens to be a joint program that's funded primarily by the federal government, and it's run at the state and county level. And based on that state and county, the coverage, exemptions, and costs will vary. So that's a mouthful. You say, oh, I'm checking out. Well, don't worry, I'm going to break down each one of these so it's more easy to kind of, digest it. Before we get to that, let's just finish saying what Medicaid is and is not. It is a government program that pays for people who need help with their activities of daily living. Remember that transferring, toileting, feeding themselves type issues? That's what this covers. It is the payer of last resort. So for example, if you're 65 and or soon to be 66 and you're receiving Social Security, you will see that Medicare Part B gets taken out of that Social Security payment. Part B is for the doctors and procedures aspect. You pay Part A out of your paycheck if you're working. And once you retire, you pay Part B typically out of Social Security. You still have to pay Part B. So it doesn't pick up everything. You're going to have to pay some of these things. But the good news is this: Medicare tends to pay more physicians than Medicaid does. Medicaid physicians take a drubbing on. They really don't like it. But if they know they're going to get Medicare, then you tend to be able to get, maintain your physician. Now remember, Medicaid is not Medicare. Medicare is an entitlement program. You paid for Medicare, at least Part A, out of your paycheck while you were working. You took out 1.46%, 1.45% every paycheck to Medicare, and you could see it on your pay stub coming out. It pays for health care. You are entitled to it once you work for 40 quarters or you're married to someone who qualifies for Medicare, et cetera, et cetera. Medicaid is not an entitlement program. It's a needs-based program. You must have the financial need to qualify for this program. So it is means tested. They're going to look, they being the government, at your assets and income limitation requirements and make sure that you fulfill them. If you have too much assets, no good. Too much income, no good. So let's start with what the different types of Medicaid is or are. The first is home care, again, which we in the legal community call community care. And that includes personal care. It includes physical therapy, home health care costs, and certain home health aid devices and services. Not devices, but services. It includes clinical or outpatient care. It includes physicians, dentists, and pharmaceuticals to an extent. The nursing home, and like I said, leave it up to attorneys to think of a worse term, institutional care, is the nursing home or medical facilities. It's the place that we don't want to end up. And frankly, on Medicaid, they don't want you there because you're not paying them as much. And it's not really you paying them, it's the government. Home and community care, which is the same thing, is the preferable way to go. Not just for your family member, but also for you personally. And frankly, often for Medicaid, If you need 24-hour care, it's not in their best interest always for them to keep you at home, but that's not how the program was written. Medicaid's supposed to be what's in your best interest. Of course, I'm seeing more and more that when an assessment is done on someone to get them to qualify for home care, Medicaid is going to say, Department of Social Services is going to say, you're really in bad shape. You need to go to a nursing home. So it kind of backfires in that case. But again, you have a choice. If you have money, you need to figure out if you want to save it or not. If you have no money, you're going to take whatever type of care you can get. If you have money, this is going to be a harder decision. This is the most important slide that we are going to go over. So take your screenshots right now, look at the numbers, memorize them, and then remember January 1st, they're going to change. But they are the important numbers because remember when I said you have to quote unquote be impoverished in order to qualify for Medicaid? It is needs-based. Well, here is the financial need. And before you see the numbers and run, let me explain them to you because it's not as bad as you may think. You can only have from the asset side, what I have in my pocket now, $15,450 in your name if you're receiving Medicaid. And people say, oh, jamoy, that's like not even, so far away from what I actually have. This isn't worth it, and you turn off this webinar. And I will tell you, don't do that yet. From an income perspective, if you go to a nursing home, you can only have $50. So it's like nothing. It pays for your haircuts. But if you have home health care, you can keep $879 per month. Now that's not so bad. And you say, well, I make $1,879 per month. This is terrible. And I say, not so much. That means you have a $1,000 spend down. You can either leave that $1,000 directly to the government, the federal government, Department of Social Services, or instead, you can leave it to something called a pooled income trust that will pay your bills. We will get back to that. The big thing about income is that there's not a lot of planning done on income. There are two aspects of Medicaid. There is the preparing for the possibility you will need it. That's the planning phase. And then there's the implementation phase. And that's when you actually put in the application. And sometimes it can be years or decades in between the planning phase and then actually applying. All of the play is with the assets. And here's why. On the income side, this is the money that comes in every month. I can't really change my income, right? I mean, I get my Social Security, and I get maybe a pension, and I get required minimum distributions, and they're the minimum distributions, so I know how much they are. So, and that's for my retirement plan. So I can't really control my income. The good news is there's no planning 5 years in advance for the income matters. You wait until you put in the Medicaid application to deal with your income issues. The assets, this on the left-hand side is where all of the play is, and this is where all of the planning is. So if you want to do Medicaid planning, I want you to focus on the asset side. And this is what we're going to focus on. Some of the exceptions that are available. So I can only have $15,450 in my name, but I can prepay my burial expenses. That could even be like $10 million if I wanted. I don't know why I would do that. I don't want to necessarily give all my money to the funeral home, but I could do that. Life insurance, if you have a permanent policy, it's only $1,500 of cash value, not $1,500 of insurance. You could have $1 million of insurance, but if it's a permanent policy, you can only have $1,500 of cash value. You can have unlimited personal property. Your costume jewelry, your mahjong board, your Ferrari, you can have that. That's not a big deal. You can have your house, and your house is not included in that $15,450 if you're getting home care. If you go to a nursing home, the house is going to be an issue. They're going to place a lien against the house. But if you're on home care, there is no lien placed against you. Wonderful. Anything placed in a supplemental needs trust, if someone else gives you money. Anything that's in a Medicaid trust, which is a trust you create with your own money. We call those Medicaid Asset Protection Trusts, and also known as income-only trusts. We will talk about those. Then last but not least, retirement plans. I fear we may not have the time to go over them too much today. Take my word of advice on this. If you are still working, your retirement plan is the most protected asset that you can have, not just for Medicaid purposes, but also potentially for creditor purposes, because most creditors can't go after your retirement plan. If you turn your retirement plan into income by giving yourself required minimum distributions, let's say I have $1 million in my IRA and my required minimum distributions are at $45,000. If I transfer that $45,000 of income, it goes into the right-hand column. Here in the asset world, it remains protected. So the asset is protected. I have to distribute the required minimum distributions and it's added to my monthly income, but I protect that asset, the underlying $1 million that's left over. And on the income side, I can have my excess monthly income go to that pooled income trust I was talking about that pays my bills. Now, like I said, there is a lot of planning that goes on the asset side. That's why assets are good. I can change them from checking accounts to money market accounts to Bitcoin to real estate to stocks and bonds and mutual funds. Income can't do that. I just get the cash. So when I'm gifting stuff, it's going to be assets. And sometimes I gift so I can fit into those categories, the $15,450 category of assets. In that case, let's say Dan, me, has $200,000 to my name. I can gift everything except $15,450, which I want to keep in my name, to my children. And 1 month later, I can conceivably qualify for community care Medicaid, meaning someone who comes to my house and helps take care of me and helps warm up food and clean a bit. 1 month. Everyone's used to this right-hand side, this 5-year limit. Well, if Dan goes to a nursing home in the next 5 years, then he has to take all that money he gifted back, that extra $185,000 I gifted to my son and daughter. Well, the good news is this. I don't need to wait 5 years for home care. I only have to wait 1 month. Now, if I make it for 4 years in home care and then I get so bad I have to go to the nursing home, I did not make it 5 years, right? I only made it 4 years. I gifted $145,000. And Medicaid's going to say, all right, we have a look back of 5 years. Dan, if you want to go to the nursing home, you transferred $14,000 or $185,000 to your children. That's not good. You don't get Medicaid for $185,000 is the numerator. The denominator is the $12,000 Medicaid typically pays to nursing homes. They're going to say, we're not going to pay for you to get nursing home care for another 16 months. I would tell my kids in that situation, look, I gave you a whole bunch of money. I want you to pay for my next year of care so I can make it that full 5-year period. I only made it 4 years. I gave you more than 1 year's worth of Medicaid, nursing home payments. Pay my last year at the nursing home and keep the difference. There's no partial credit for me making it 4 years. That 5-year look back is all or nothing. Keep that in mind. You do not get partial credit. Now, these are some of the exemptions we spoke about. We've already discussed them. I'm going to break each of them down. From the asset side of our equation, we have the retirement plans. I spent a lot of time on that. Your spouse can refuse to take care of you. And this isn't me refusing to do the dishes. This is me saying I'm not going to pay for my spouse's care. That gives us some additional assets that we can hold on to. If you go to a nursing home, we can use promissory notes that are Medicaid compliant. We're not going to be talking about those today. That's like Medicaid class 300. Trusts must be Medicaid compliant. Your revocable trust is not Medicaid compliant. Must be an irrevocable trust and must comport with Medicaid. Now, on the income side, if you have excess income, remember, this isn't really planning. This is once you apply for Medicaid. You also have that spousal refusal plus the pooled income trust that I had discussed before. What does home care cover? Home care covers all those activities of daily living I went over. Now, the issue, like I said before, with long-term care, where you can choose how many hours you get, is with Medicaid, you cannot. They're going to send a social worker to your house to check you out. And if this is your parents, just imagine I'm talking to your parents, all right? So people say, this doesn't have to apply to me. This has to do with my parents. That's fine. Imagine that your parents are you, and I'm speaking to your parents right now. There's no guarantee as to how many hours they're going to receive. The social worker from Medicaid is going to come over and say, you know what, Doris, you only qualify for 6 hours a day. I know you want somebody here 12 hours, but you're not in that condition. Well, that's a problem, right? But there's no guarantee. That's just the way it is. There are no guarantees in life. And unfortunately, this is another example. There's no cleaning or fancy cooking involved. Don't expect a Medicaid paid caregiver to make you your lobster thermidor on Wednesday. It's not going to happen. They are required to heat up food. That's fine. They're not expected to get behind your toilet with a toothbrush and, like clean it down that way. Now, if you get this managed care program from from Medicaid, which we'll go over in a moment, there is some cooking and cleaning included. The issue is for standard Medicaid, the traditional type, a caregiver must be qualified by a Medicaid compliant agency. And again, everyone prefers home care to the nursing home, but it's hard to get that 24-hour home care. I think I've discussed that more than enough. And I've alluded to this now a few times, which is managed long-term care programs. And this is where people get confused because they say, I thought we already talked about long-term care and that's gone. And now you're talking about some other, private paid program, which is managed long-term care, like insurance. And I say, this is where it gets tricky. Managed long-term care is a Medicaid program. This is not long-term care. This is managed long-term care. And the managed long-term care program is relatively new in New York because Medicaid does this. They more or less give you like a pool of money per month. It's very much like that long-term care policy that we were discussing. And it provides for Medicaid benefits and additional services through contracted agreements between state agencies that accept per member per month payments for these services. So I could ask if I had managed long-term care through the Medicaid program to spend some of that money on someone to clean the apartment. Or I could pay, conceivably, my children a nominal wage to clean out the apartment. The problem is the dollar amount is limited. That's the big challenge. So I have to figure what's the best place for me to spend this money that they are giving me for my Medicaid uses. I know some people that love managed long-term care in the Medicaid program. I know some people that hate it because, again, it's limited as far as the amount of care that you get. You get more options, but the limitation is all based on the money. And again, if you have more questions about this, it's its own program. So if you have a question you want to write about what is managed long-term care and you have 17 different questions, I wouldn't be surprised. This is not the day to go over it. I apologize. Well, now the issue is this. We're always worried about how do we qualify for care and what types of care and what's exempted. I told you retirement plans are the best asset, and I may have actually been lying to you because the home you live in, that is your primary residence, that is yours, not a rental, not the home in Florida that you rent out to other people, not the apartment that you're in that you rent from a landlord, but the home that you live in, your homestead that you own, is protected from creditors under the following circumstances. If you are married and you are the sick individual, your spouse can own that home, and there will not be a lien placed against it as long as you die first and the spouse still owns the home at that time. Next, we already said, if you're getting home care, not the nursing home, not institutional care, but if I'm living in my home here in New York and I need home health care Medicaid only, Medicaid will not place a lien on the house if the house is worth less than $858,000. Clearly, this is an issue if you live in parts of Brooklyn or Manhattan or Westchester and you have a McMansion, or Suffolk or Nassau for that matter. But for many people, this is a good way out as well. If you have a child caregiver who's actually a caregiver who lived in the home with you for 2+ years currently, then you can transfer the house to them. Child caregiver exemption is a problem because how many of these children are actually taking care of their parent? It's less now than it used to be. The other thing is if you have a sibling who's a co-owner on the house that lives there with you, so it's a house like mom and dad gave you and your sister, that's an example. It would avoid getting a Medicaid lien even if you go to a nursing home and it goes to the well sibling. If you have a disabled child and you are disabled, we will give the house to the child or entrust the child and there will be no lien. And in fact, there are a lot of exemptions available if we're disabled and we have a disabled child. And then lastly, anything that is owned by a Medicaid trust. I'm going to talk about spousal refusal briefly. I know this is another area where people would love to talk. Your spouse may refuse to pay for your care. Hopefully because you have too many assets, not because they're just pissed at you because you never did the laundry. Now, the consequences is the Department of Social Services could require your spouse to pay 25% of your well spouse, I should say, 25% of the excess income that they're receiving over $3,090 a month. So if my spouse, who's healthy, is making $7,090 a month, she's making $4,000 over the amount that she as the well spouse can receive. I as the sick spouse can only have $879 per month if I'm at home care. My wife has $7,090. Well, the good news is this. She can keep $3,000 of the excess $4,000 that she's getting. That seems pretty fair when you think about it, for considering the amount of care I'm probably getting. My wife is giving up $1,000 to get $4,000 or $5,000 of care for me by the government. Sounds pretty good. Now, the Department of Social Services can place a lien against the well spouse upon their death. So this isn't a catch-all. Which brings us then to Medicaid trusts. Medicaid trusts are for your assets. They must be irrevocable. Your friend who talks about the revocable trust they did with an attorney years ago, yeah, they don't got a Medicaid trust. It has to be irrevocable or else it doesn't work, and it has to be compliant with the Medicaid laws. If you have too much income or assets, you must give up some of these control to the government. So in this case, the issue is this. The government's saying that if you want to qualify for our programs, you have to give up some of the control. So for example, I can be the beneficiary of this trust, but I cannot be the trustee, and I'm only entitled to certain things. So typically, these are the parties to a trust. There's a person who creates the trust. We call them the creator or settlor, because when we want to confuse people, we do multiple words for the same thing. That's a person who creates the trust and then gives money to the trust or places their deed in the name of the trust. I could create a Medicaid trust and call it the Daniel Timins Medicaid Irrevocable Trust. And then the deed of my property will say the same thing. The trustee is the person who manages the property. If it's an investment account, the trustee is going to tell the investment advisor, this is what I want you to invest in. They're going to pay the taxes, prepare the tax return, and pay themselves a commission, and pay money over or use the funds for the benefit of the party on the right-hand side, the beneficiary, who just sits back, enjoys that cool, hard cash, or the benefits that that provides them, or the services, or the widescreen television. Now, here's the thing. This is who does what in a Medicaid trust. If you are the sick individual, you usually create the trust. The trustee cannot be you. This is what sinks all revocable trusts, because the revocable trust you created, you are most likely the person who's the trustee. So that won't work. Plus, it's a revocable trust. Medicaid has to be irrevocable trusts. The trustee has to be someone other than you. It's usually your kids. That is permissible. It's usually not your spouse, not permissible. Now, who's the beneficiary? Anyone other than the trustee typically. And this slide isn't entirely correct. You are entitled to the income, but not the assets from the trust. We call these, as you'll see in a moment, income-only trusts, also known as Medicaid Asset Protection Trusts. Here are the qualities of a Medicaid trust. I call it a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust because let's break this down. This is from right to left. This is a trust that protects your assets, not your income, for Medicaid purposes. You're only entitled to take income from this trust, so it's protecting the asset, and I get to keep the income as the person who created the trust. It's a trust that only allows income to be distributed to me. Any asset can be distributed to my children, for example. That's perfectly fine. Who usually uses these types of trusts? Aging individuals or people who are already disabled, and people who are willing to accept Medicaid level care. If you have $8 million to your name, you may say, you know what, the type of care I'm going to get from paying out of my pocket is going to be substantially better than what the government will pay for. And the answer is, you're probably right. But for people who are willing to receive Medicaid level care, that's fine. There are special features also. Once income is distributed, it can be distributed to the creator of the trust. That would be me in this case. It leaves all remaining trust funds to the children. And again, one of the things that we attorneys do is we allow your children to be able to distribute the asset to themselves. You cannot get that, but your kid can. So you need extra money, your kid takes it out. course, then, you know, it's more money that is used up on your care, and you're trying to avoid that typically. Now, what's the best way to fund a Medicaid trust? I can tell you that if you're someone who is willing to do Medicaid, or if you have a parent that says, I worked hard and all I really have is my house and a few $1,000s here and there is very little reason not to place your house in a Medicaid trust. Here's why. It's an asset protection trust, protecting the house. I'm only entitled to income. Well, I live in the house. What am I going to do? I'm not getting income from the house. That's perfect. Because now I'm protecting the house. There's no income to take out, so it's not as though I have to pay income taxes. It's not going to have to go and disqualify me from that $879 per month, so that's perfect. And when I pass away, it still gets a step up in cost basis. So if I bought this house 55 years ago for $50,000 and now it's worth $1.2 million because it's in Bushwick or some other neighborhood, when I die, my children get that house and they don't have to pay capital gains taxes on it. And you still get to maintain your STAR exemptions if you have any of these favorable real estate tax exemptions. So it's hard for me to say when a Medicaid trust does not make sense if your family member wants to preserve assets, is scared they're going to get sick, and has their primary asset as their house, and they want to leave it to you as a kid. So we handled the asset side. We're going to spend our last few minutes going over pooled income trusts. You chose to create your Medicaid trust with someone like me. You chose the trustee, your choice. Everything looks good. You do that up front. Now you're qualifying for Medicaid because you need it. You got a stroke, you have dementia, and it's gotten bad enough, you need the government to pay. Well, you have too much income. You have that $1,879 per month income I told you about. You need to give that $1,000, that is called your spend down, either to the government or to a not-for-profit company that runs a pooled income trust. A pooled income trust is run by a not-for-profit organization. And it accepts lump sums and that spend down amount, that extra $1,000 of income I'm getting every month. Now, I, as the beneficiary of this pooled trust, or my power of attorney, will forward them the bills and they will pay. What will they pay for? Widescreen television, check. Utilities, check. Mortgage, yep. Real estate taxes, you got it. They will pay for everything, but they will not allow me to take money out. They will not gift money to other people. They won't spend the money on alcohol, tobacco, or firearms, and they won't pay for what Medicaid pays for. I know that's a mouthful, but the basic idea is this. You're able to use this money to continue to pay your bills. And who usually uses them? Only people who have too much income. If I make $870 a month, I could make another $9 in income a month. I don't need a pooled income trust. Now, who usually uses them also age-wise? Can be anybody, but it tends to be the elderly. If you're disabled and you're younger, you may use a pooled income trust. Now, pooled income trust, the special features are this. You keep your, and this is the issue that I should say that comes up. With the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, the one you created it with me and placed your house in, that's protected. And when I die, it goes to who I want. Pooled income trust, the problem is that the money that goes into the pooled income trust has to get kept when you die by that pooled income trust company. They're not for profit, doesn't mean they don't want the money. So I always tell people, because I can leave the asset to whomever I want, but the money in the pooled income trust has to go to the not-for-profit when I die. I tell people, spend the money in the pooled income trust as much as possible every single month. And then who cares if there's only $10 left in there when you pass away? Pooled income trust gets to keep that money, or the not-for-profit does. The biggest issue that I tend to have is not just that, but the other issue is this. You can't choose how to invest the money in pooled income trust. It's just in cash. So that, again, is the downside of a pooled income trust. I would have loved to have spoken longer. I'm sorry we missed 2 minutes of the presentation. You know, there's plenty of other slides here. If you ever are interested, I'm sure you can ask PSS Circle of Care to send them to you. Or if they're okay, you can always contact me. My contact information is on the very first slide. I had a wonderful time. I would love to talk more about Medicaid and long-term care and pooled income trusts and Medicaid asset protection trusts whenever you would like. But in the meantime, I will open it up for a few questions. I'm sorry we were so rushed today. There was a lot of material.
Thank you again, Daniel. Yes, if anybody has an additional question, need to know more about all the information, you can reach out to Daniel directly, or of course, we're going to have another webinar in the near future, so we can probably have probably have more information. If you click on the Q&A box, Daniel, you will see some questions.
I'll need to minimize, just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I may need to switch this out too.
If you go up your screen, the top of your screen, you will see it. It would go the drop down and you'll be able to see the Q&A box.
This one?
Yes.
Nope. Where is this? Here?
1 second. Just move the mouse all the way up your screen.
Okay.
All the way up. No, nothing?
Nope.
What about the bottom?
Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
All right, we got a question.
Mm-hmm.
You have a pension with the beneficiary. How is this applied if you do a pooled trust? Well, the question is this. I have a pension, perhaps it's going to me because I was the worker, and I'm guessing this is what the question is, and I name maybe my spouse as the beneficiary. Well, what if I'm making too much income? So I'm using the excess money, that $1,000 of the $1,879 I can use, and I'm putting that $1,000 into the pooled trust. What happens when I die? Good news is the pension then goes to your surviving spouse. So the funds in the pooled income trust could have been used by you. That's great. Once you pass away, the pension now reverts to your spouse and there's no issue. Any other questions?
So someone has sent me a question, but they, unfortunately, they will not be able to attend. Maybe somebody has the same question, I'm going to read it to you, okay?
All right.
So they ask, how can we transfer ownership of real estate?
Real estate transfers are very easy to do, believe it or not. If you own the property, you sign a deed over to somebody else, or you place it over into the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust that I was discussing. Signing a deed is not hard, and an attorney who practices in the area that I practice in, or real estate, can help you do it pretty easily. You can go to the county clerk yourself and do that as well. You don't always have to give this property to a trust. You could give it directly to a child or somebody else, and that's great, and that works. The only downside is you don't get that step up in basis. Remember I said I purchased a house for $50,000 and now it's worth $1.2 million because it's in Bushwick? Well, if I give it to my children when I die in a Medicaid trust, they don't pay capital gains taxes. If I give it to them while I'm alive, they get my $50,000 cost basis. They have to pay capital gains on over $1 million. No good. So, but you can just transfer a deed without any problem as long as you're the one who owns it and you're signing it, or a power of attorney. The issue comes up with co-ops. We're in New York City. Co-ops, you tend to have to live there to be able to have your name on the stock certificates. So co-ops are tricky. They could be their own class, but the big issue is co-ops can just say, no, we won't allow you to transfer this to other people, period. And you're stuck because co-ops stink, but it's what we got.
Okay, actually that's what the person asked, because it's a co-op and it's under her mother's name, and the mother has dementia, but she already have the power of attorney.
Power of attorney is only part of it. Remember, a co-op doesn't have to accept an irrevocable trust or anybody who's not an owner who's also living there. So in this case, co-ops are very difficult. You have to get the information from the managing agent, and more specifically, most likely from their legal counsel. This is the type of thing that you'll never figure out on your own. I mean, like, you might be an Einstein of, a self-styled Einstein of Medicaid. It's not going to happen.
Okay, so maybe the person, when they go back to the webinar, they can contact you if you have more information for them, or if you have more tips to give them. Again, thank you for doing the webinar. If anybody has additional question, you can reach out directly to Danielle. And the webinar will be online in 2-3 days, so you can review it again. Yes, can you put your last slide or has your information? Yes, thank you. And thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you, Shana. Thank you, Circle of Care PSS.
Thank you, and have a great day, everyone.